Hi, it's Katrina. Deserts. We often think of them as barren, lifeless landscapes, but beneath the scorching sun and shifting sands lie secrets waiting to be unearthed. Cities of the dead and slithering serpents. Today's video is all about shocking things found in the desert. I hope you're ready to get a little sandy. The cities of the dead. This civilization was obsessed with death. And no, it wasn't Egypt. They weren't just content with burying their dead. They had to put them on a pedestal. This ancient culture set the stage for democracy while stashing their dead in bizarre cliffside caves looming above a vast desert. 2,000 years ago, the Lycians ruled the southwestern part of modern-day Turkey, and they were way ahead of their time. Their functioning democratic federation would ultimately inspire the original political structure for the United States. While the rest of the world was figuring out politics, the Lycians were busy crafting some of the most dramatic tombs you will ever see. Imagine a whole city of the dead perched on a cliff. Apparently, just lying around on the ground wasn't good enough for them. They had to be higher, closer to the heavens. Ground level, too pedestrian. These guys were all about that VIP skybox in the afterlife. You might be surprised to know that the Lycians left their cliffside burials all over Turkey's stunning Mediterranean coast. You are never far from a serious resting place with a view while traveling here. Take the port city of Fethiye, for example. It's a laid-back town with an alarming number of tombs. One of the coolest spots to check out is the Amintas rock tombs. These bad boys date to the 4th century BC. The great thing about Fethiye is that you can climb up to these ancient mausoleums to get a killer view of the Aegean Sea at sunset. You ready to go yet? Despite all the tombs, no one really knows why the Lycians love to be buried on high. Archaeologists like Catherine Draycott from Durham University think it's a bit of a mystery. Some theories suggest it could be tied to ancestor worship. Others think it's all about status. Or maybe they just really hated digging. Who can blame them? Then again, maybe it's so their souls could reach the heavens faster. But the Lycians weren't just into carving rock tombs and calling it a day. They got creative with their resting spots. You'll find sarcophagi everywhere, sometimes even sitting in the middle of busy roads. There are so many stone coffins in the region that locals don't even notice them. They're as normal as the clouds above. If you want to explore but don't feel like scaling a mountain, no problem. The Lycian tombs are everywhere, and depending on the village, you can find gigantic sarcophagi sitting in the parking lots. If you like tombs, sarcophagi, mystery, and hot desert sun, you should definitely check out the Lycian ruins of Turkey. Searching for Martian life. It's time to hunt down some aliens. One of the driest, most unforgiving places on Earth is helping scientists find life on Mars. Those who have stood in Chile's Atacama Desert have stood in the one place on Earth that is closest to what the Martian surface is like. You don't need to leave the planet to know what it feels like to be lost on Mars. Lucas Horstman, a researcher who braved the desert in 2018, said that the Atacama feels like Mars, minus the spacesuits. Horstman and his team made a game-changing discovery that year. They found viable microbes, tiny organisms that are like the rock stars of the microscopic world. These tiny critters live more than 12 feet deep beneath the crusty, parched surface of the desert. They are surviving in conditions so harsh is kind of a miracle. Finding these hardy microbes has changed the way that scientists view life on other planets. If there are living things on Mars, they could be hiding over a dozen feet deep. That means that NASA needs to get some better rovers with some better digging instruments. Maybe a rover with a tiny backhoe attachment? Or heck, just send Matt Damon back. He seems to have a knack for surviving on Mars. Digging holes in the desert isn't exactly a walk in the park. Imagine trying to dig a hole in a baking oven while getting hit with a UV radiation blast. Horstman and his team suffered through it, digging into the scorching, crystal-filled soil. It took weeks of hard work, but in the end, they pulled off the impossible. At the surface, they found your typical desert microbes, nothing too shocking. But when they dug deeper, they found a whole community of microbes unlike anything seen above ground. Conditions on Mars are a little harsher than in the Atacama Desert. Not only is it extremely cold, but the UV rays are so intense they could cook you faster than a pizza in a 500-degree oven. It's like being inside a cold microwave. But it could be a different story under the surface. Horstman and his crew suggest that the gypsum they found in Atacama's soil could be a clue. If critters are thriving in Earth's deep gypsum deposits, they could also be thriving in Mars' deep soil. If only we could get an astronaut to Mars with a half-decent shovel. Unveiling an underground city. Think your basement is cluttered? Wait till you see what archaeologists found beneath this Iranian town. A whole other city. A secret was hiding under their feet the whole time, and they never knew it. It took a team of archaeologists to break into this ancient city buried under the scorching heat of the Persian desert. I take you now to the town of Abarku, Iran. Archaeologists were digging under 5 seemingly normal houses when they uncovered something that made them stop, stare, and gape like fish out of water. All their digging had opened the way into an underground metropolis. It was like digging your way into Narnia. No talking beavers, though, sadly. At first, it looked like they had found just a few secret rooms under the homes. But as they dug deeper, they realized those rooms were connected to something much bigger. The team explored dusty tunnels winding through what was once a functioning city complete with waterways, passageways, and dark chambers where the residents could have played the world's earliest version of hide and seek. All right, but why? This is always the big question. Why is there a city underneath this small Persian town? Everyone needs an escape plan. Archaeologists think the city was built for defending against invasions. By defending, I really mean hiding in the twisting corridors of an engineering marvel. Move over, escape rooms. This is the real deal. And here's where it gets even cooler. The age of the underground town is still being investigated, but the architectural style points to the Qajar people, a group from the 10th and 11th centuries. The Kahar were big players in Iranian history, even founding the Kahar dynasty that ruled Iran from the late 18th century until 1925. According to Hossein Hatami, the mayor of Abarku, these underground rooms were strategically designed to keep things cool during the sweltering summer heat. The water running through the underground channels would have chilled the surrounding air. This was primitive air conditioning at its finest. As the excavation continues, scientists are expecting to find even more passageways, hidden chambers, and maybe a few ancient artifacts to heat things up. And now for a quick break, because it's shout-out time! I want to give a big thank you to Daryl Leshman and Angus for supporting this channel. Thanks so much for letting me be a part of your day. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The creepiest place in Wyoming. Get ready to explore one of the creepiest abandoned complexes in all of America. It is straight out of a horror movie. Wyoming's Red Desert is known for its haunting beauty. It's an expanse of desolate wilderness where nature thrives and humans not so much. It's also a place littered with abandoned structures, eerie reminders of lives and stories long forgotten. Among these ghostly remnants, one desert complex stands out. It's so unsettling that even seasoned photographer Ken Dreisey felt the need to get in, snap his photos, and get the hell out. Dries, a retired University of Wyoming professor, has spent years trekking across the state, documenting both nature and forgotten places. But even a decade after stumbling across this particular site, it lingers in his memory like a bad dream. It was October 2013, and Dries, along with fellow photographer Ed Sherline, was exploring the Haystack Mountains and Adobe Town when they spotted the structure from a dirt road. From a distance, it looked like just another rundown home in the desert, left behind by someone who had moved on. But as they got closer, the red flags started piling up. There were obvious signs that something was amiss. The house was standing, barely, but it was patched together with stolen billboards. One piece advertised McDonald's, another a hotel, and another a Ramada Inn. Someone had clearly been stealing billboards to keep the house together. They climbed a staircase made of discarded wooden pallets, stepped over a bleached raven skeleton, and slipped inside. You have to be crazy to not realize a bleached skeleton is a bad omen. Inside, they found piles of old clothing, blankets haphazardly tacked to the walls for insulation, and a silence that made their skin crawl. It was a scene out of a post-apocalyptic nightmare. The property was a collection of bizarre relics, each one adding to its unsettling atmosphere. There was a flipped-over car riddled with bullet holes, an abandoned school bus, its windows shattered, filled with discarded clothing, a mattress, and a 1997 calendar taped to the window. Drace also found a Bible left open to the final passages. What was happening in this deserted home? Unlike the many old farmhouses and ranches that dot the Red Desert, this place had no clear story. No traces of ranching life, no signs of an old business. It was just there, waiting to be found. Who were these people, and what happened to them? Since no one has ever solved the mystery, I pose the question to you. If you have any info on this creepy house, let us all know in the comments. The largest rock art petroglyph. Let's go back several epochs and figure out how you carve a giant giraffe without a chisel. The world's first nature documentary is a picture of a giraffe carved into stone 7,000 years ago. The biggest petroglyph on the planet is located deep in the Sahara Desert, where the only thing more common than sand is more sand. Here looms two gigantic giraffes, carved into stone around 5000 BC. Together, they are known as the Dabu giraffes, the largest known animal carvings in the world. Someone a long time ago was crazy for giraffes. But these massive petroglyphs aren't just a prehistoric doodle session. They tell the story of a time lost to history, a time when the Sahara was green instead of brown, and ruled by ancient cultures. 7,000 years ago, there was no metal. There definitely weren't any tools, and there was no electric power. Unless, of course, aliens were involved. Assuming aliens were not supplying power tools, how did the ancient artists carve an 18-foot-tall giraffe into solid sandstone? Archaeologists say they used flint tools and petrified wood chisels. The patience and dedication required to carve the world's biggest petroglyph must have been immense. This was no afternoon craft project. The engravings show an insane level of detail, capturing the giraffe's leopard-like spots, elegant neck, and enormous eyes. If you're wondering how these two giraffes have the title of biggest petroglyph when the Nazca lines exist, let me explain. The Nazca lines are geoglyphs carved on the floor of the desert. The Dabu giraffes were carved into solid stone as petroglyphs, which are usually quite small. Not the size of a house, for sure. The real mystery here is why giraffes? And why carve them on a rocky outcrop where only mountain climbers could see them? They were really hidden and out of the way, when most artists would want their work to be seen. Researchers suspect they may have been sacred symbols. It's been speculated that early humans in Africa admired giraffes for their ability to see beyond. Giraffes have the gift of foresight and can see into the spirit realm. It was a trait that made them a mystical symbol for shamans and priests. But who were the real artists behind these masterpieces? The Tuareg people have been in the region for centuries, but the carvings are way older than them. In 2000, archaeologists uncovered clues just north of Dabu at Gobero, the site of an ancient lake. This dry, desolate spot was once home to two Stone Age cultures. First was the Kithian, 10,000 years ago. They were tall, strong hunters who thrived when the Sahara was lush. The desert was more of a jungle in those days. Then 8,000 years ago came the Tenarians. Oddly enough, these humans were shorter, leaner, and more inclined to herd cattle. Both groups left behind pottery, tools, and human burials, suggesting they had spiritual beliefs and honored their dead. Could they have also been the world's first wildlife artists? One of these cultures was probably responsible for the giraffes, but no one can say which one. As the rain stopped falling in the Sahara, civilization moved on, leaving it to become the dry desert we know today. Pet Cemetery for real. It is Pet Cemetery 2.0 Egypt Edition. Instead of bringing cats back from the dead, we'll be resurrecting crocodiles and baboons. Seriously though, archaeologists have uncovered what might just be the world's oldest pet cemetery. It's a 2,000-year-old burial site at the ancient port of Berenice on the Red Sea coast. This isn't just some backwoods barnyard graveyard. Cats were found wearing beaded collars. Monkeys were dug up clutching their favorite toys. A dog was discovered tucked neatly into a palm leaf blanket. If you ask me, this is proof that humans have always been obsessed with their fur babies. If you thought pampered pets were a modern obsession, ancient Egyptians would like to have a word. You already know the Egyptians were famous for mummifying animals, all kinds, cats, birds, even crocodiles, usually in the name of the gods. But this cemetery gives off totally different vibes. Think less sacrificial altar and more cuddle puddle. According to Marta Osipinska, a zoo archaeologist from the Polish Academy of Sciences, this was no place for sacrifices or religious offerings. These animals were buried with love, not as brutal rituals. Unlike the usual massive graves of sacrificed animals found in other Egyptian sites, these creatures showed signs of old age, illness, and disabilities. That's only possible if someone cared for them long into their old age. These were without a doubt pets, not working animals or monkey sacrifices. Which pets do you think the Egyptians gave the VIP burial treatment to the most? The answer is definitely cats, because cats have always ruled the internet, and apparently ancient Egypt too. They make up 90% of the discovered burials, with many still wearing decorative iron collars or colorful necklaces. The second most popular pet was dogs. Many of them were buried inside broken amphorae, like little DIY ceramic sarcophagi. People also had monkeys as pets. One monkey was found buried with 3 kittens, a woven basket, and 2 exotic seashells. This person's household must have been really fun with monkeys and kittens roaming around. There was also 1 fox found in the graveyard, which must have had an awesome backstory. And there was 1 falcon, because of course, this is Egypt after all. Perhaps the wildest discovery was an ostrakon. That's an archaeological word for a broken piece of pottery used as a writing surface. Scrawled on the ostrakon was what can only be described as an ancient text message. It reassured the pet owner that their cats were being looked after while they were away. 2,000 years ago, you still had to scramble to find a pet sitter at the last moment. There is no doubt that the Egyptians were a lot more like us than people realize. The lost Utopia of the Sands. Utopia existed 4,000 years ago. A true utopia, unlike anything that exists in the world today. Unfortunately, this ancient utopia is only a memory, one that was recently unearthed in the Arabian desert. Amidst the endless dunes of Saudi Arabia, archaeologists stumbled upon the ruins of a long-lost city built by an advanced civilization. It's called Al-Nata, and it was hidden away from the modern world in the desert oasis of Khaybar. The city, believed to have housed at least 500 people, was built in 2400 BC by nomads who decided they were done with the whole wandering lifestyle. They had seen all there was to see and were ready to settle down. These prehistoric humans buckled down and created a thriving urban settlement. They didn't just throw up a few huts or hovels. They constructed multi-story buildings like modern apartments. They built an intricate necropolis and even had a fortified wall stretching 8.9 miles around the city. That's a huge step up from being homeless nomads. Who were these people, and what was life like in the world's earliest known utopia? People had been living in the Arabian desert for thousands of years already. Pastoral nomads had roamed the northwest Arabian Peninsula for centuries, including the famous Bedouin tribes. They lived off herds of goats, sheep, and camels. Somewhere along the way, some of these nomads decided to settle down, likely to protect themselves from raids. Researchers from the French National Center for Scientific Research were blown away by the discovery. Al-Nata was subdivided into districts, including residential areas, a political hub, and an elaborate cemetery. It was an early Bronze Age version of a well-organized town. Archaeologists discovered metal weapons like axes and daggers that suggest they were also skilled in metalworking and took security seriously. You've got to keep the utopia safe from the barbarians. That's Utopia Living 101. The fortified wall surrounding Al-Nata further supports the idea that these people weren't just peaceful settlers, but also knew how to defend themselves when necessary. Okay, but are you ready for the most unbelievable part? Surely there was someone in charge of this utopia. A king, a chief, a czar. Someone must have been giving orders, right? Pottery fragments found at the site hint at an egalitarian society, where people lived without rigid social hierarchies. Egalitarian means no kings, no nobility, just everyone working together for survival. You would think a walled city with almost 100 abandoned buildings would be easy to spot, but nope. Al Nata was camouflaged under black volcanic basalt rock. This natural disguise kept it hidden from looters for thousands of years until satellite imagery finally revealed it. Guillaume Charlot, the study's lead archaeologist, said the basalt concealed the site to such a degree that it protected it from illegal excavations. When archaeologists started digging, they found a perfect time capsule. Al Nata can be summed up in one word: innovation. Unlike other major settlements, 4,000 years ago, the people of Al Nata developed a slow urbanism approach. They gradually adapted to their environment rather than rushing to build. This resulted in stability and a healthy, happy, utopian society. There is a lesson here for modern societies if we're willing to listen. Slow, steady, sustainable leads to happiness and more pleasant societal cohesion. But wait, what happened to the people of the desert? Their city was swallowed by the sand for 4,000 years, so it's not like their utopia outlasted the competition. This is actually a huge mystery that no one seems able to solve. The city was abandoned sometime between 1500 and 1300 BC, and no one knows why. Whatever the reason, the residents of Al Nata left behind a treasure trove of archaeological wonders. Do you think another utopia will ever appear in the world again? This snake has googly eyes. Have you ever seen a snake with eyes that look like they've been glued to the top of its head? No? Then let me introduce you to the Arabian sand boa, scientific name Eryx jayakari. This little guy is the definition of derpy. You can find this oddball slithering around the sandy deserts of the Arabian Peninsula and southwestern Iran. It's living the dream in some of the world's hottest, driest places. Where we would surely perish, the derp snake thrives. It's also a picky eater, which is surprising given the lack of food in the desert. The sand boa has a particular taste for short-fingered geckos, Beluk rock geckos, and worm lizards. Delicious! The reason the Arabian sand boa looks like it should be a meme legend is that its eyes are right on the top of its head. They look glued on. Some say the only reason the Arabian sand boa has survived so long is its prey can't stop laughing in time to run away. But don't let its goofy face fool you. These googly eyes are a secret weapon. This sneaky snake buries itself in the sand, blending in with expert camouflage. When dinner comes along, it peeks its little eyes out and strikes. Those scrumptious geckos never notice the googly eyes leering from the sand until it's too late. You don't have much to worry about, though. The Arabian sand boa grows only about 15 inches long and is not nearly big enough to eat you. To be honest, it's kind of a pitiful creature compared to other snakes. When the babies hatch after about 9 weeks, mom has to help them crack out of their eggs. The little hatchlings don't have sharp enough teeth to break through themselves. And don't worry about the sand boa going extinct anytime soon. These guys are doing just fine. The good news is they are common throughout the desert and aren't on the endangered list. There's no need to start a sand boa rescue mission yet, at least. To be found in Mongolia. Poor Gobi, always the bridesmaid, never the bride of desert fame. You can't forget about the Gobi Desert. Everyone talks about the Sahara, but the Gobi doesn't get enough attention. It should though, because this place is hiding some historical bombshells. In 2024, the Institute of Archaeology of the Mongolian Academy of Sciences dropped some wisdom. They found ancient human remains in Mongolia from the Pleistocene era. Amidst the remains was one of the oldest teeth on record. How old, you ask? Try 25,000 years old. Imagine the plaque buildup. This ancient tooth was found in the Kutul Us cave deep in the Bulgan Sum Umnagobi Imag. Yeah, places in Mongolia have crazy names. Sounds like a spell from Harry Potter. You're probably thinking, big whoop, it's a tooth. So what? I'll tell you so what. This is only the second time human remains from the Pleistocene era have been found in Mongolia, and it's the first big find of its kind in Northeast Asia in the last 5 years. Dr. Erikson Gelegdorsh couldn't contain his excitement. He said the remains could reshape our understanding of human migration and ancient life in Mongolia. Mongolia wasn't just the homeland of Genghis Khan and his Mongol army. The scientific team went into this mission with a solid plan. They zeroed in on several ancient lakes in the Tsakyurt Valley, a place that was prime real estate for prehistoric humans from the Paleolithic to the Neolithic. Along the shores of these long-gone lakes, the researchers unearthed stone tools, bone beads, and other artifacts. It was like an ancient flea market, minus the bootlegged DVDs. And it gets better. In the mountainous Artsvogd Range, researchers stumbled upon several open-air Paleolithic settlements where prehistoric humans were busy crafting tools out of flint, green quartzite, reddish jasper, and black flint. Now let's get back to the real star of the show, the human tooth. This was an adult incisor, clocking in at a whopping 24,700 years old, as confirmed by radiocarbon dating. Scientists are already buzzing about the DNA analysis potential, which could reveal who these early Mongolian inhabitants were related to. Here's the deal. No one knows exactly who was wandering around in the Gobi Desert 25,000 years ago. They may have been close relatives of the Denisovans, an extinct human species similar to Neanderthals, but they could also be connected to a mysterious, long-lost human lineage scientists don't even know about yet. I'm talking missing link here, people. A human species that doesn't even have a place on our family tree. Dr. Gelik Dorj and his team are already knee-deep in genetic analysis, and they expect results in the next couple of years. Sadly, we have to wait a while for the toothy conclusion. In the meantime, be sure to subscribe and check out other videos from the channel. The Pharaoh's Lost Pit Stop. If you've ever dreamed of a vacation fit for a pharaoh, you might be about 3,500 years too late. Archaeologists in Egypt just uncovered an ancient royal retreat in the northern Sinai region. And let's just say it was the swankiest Airbnb of its time, minus the continental breakfast. This wasn't an all-inclusive resort situation for pharaohs. What archaeologists found is little more than a mud brick structure today melted into the desert. But in its heyday, it was used as a royal rest stop for none other than King Thutmose III, who ruled from 1479 to 1425 BC. You're probably thinking the Sinai Desert isn't the best place for a vacation. You're right, it's not. But the luxury rest stop wasn't for rest and relaxation. If the pharaoh wanted some R&R, he would have probably gone to a villa on the Red Sea. This mud brick structure was more of a luxurious military barracks. It was a place the pharaoh could rest in comfort before marching off with his army to conquer the eastern Mediterranean. Given its strategic location near the eastern gate of Egypt, the site likely played a crucial role in ancient military campaigns. Unlike your typical ancient ruin filled with broken pottery, this site was surprisingly tidy. The lack of ceramic shards and other trash suggests this structure was more than just a rest stop. It was a proper royal retreat. The building layout includes 2 rectangular halls, multiple adjoining rooms, and limestone columns, adding a touch of class to this ancient getaway. You have to use your imagination for this one, picturing the pharaoh lounging while his army camped outside in the blowing sands. Of course, history has a way of recycling things, kind of like that sweater you keep meaning to donate but never do. Over time, the retreat was fortified with a perimeter wall, transforming it from a royal stopover into a fully fledged fortress. Then, in the third intermediate period of 1070 to 664 BC, the site was repurposed as a cemetery. Talk about a career change. There's one more thing to know about this amazing find. The royal retreat/fortress/cemetery is located at Tel Habwa, the starting point of the legendary Horus Road. The Horus Road was an ancient route which stretched from Egypt through the Sinai Peninsula and into the Gaza Strip. It served as a key military pathway lined with fortresses and checkpoints. This whole area has been militarized since humanity started. 1,000,000-year-old tools. If you think your tools are ancient, hanging up in the garage with a bit of rust on them, wait until you hear this. Archaeologists in Iraq just unearthed hand axes that are a mind-blowing 1.5 million years old. And that's not all. They also stumbled upon 7 Paleolithic sites scattered across Iraq's western desert. It was the field trip of a lifetime. Ella Egberts, a researcher from the Free University of Brussels, led the charge on this discovery. She embarked on a pilot project to track down ancient archaeological materials in the Al-Shabaka area. The goal was to uncover clues about the region's geological history. Turns out, the history was hiding some serious prehistoric swag. It was a massive success, giving researchers a glimpse into the past. The team focused on an area that during the Pleistocene was home to a vast lake. That's always a good sign. That lake now is completely dry. Ancient riverbeds still snake through the harsh, sandy landscape, serving as a reminder of a time when this desert was far more hospitable. During their dig, Egberts and her team collected more than 850 artifacts. These included hand axes from the early Paleolithic period. The sheer number of artifacts found on the surface suggests that even more hidden treasures are waiting to be uncovered. Just in case you don't remember when the early Paleolithic period was, that could be up to 3 million years ago. This is just the tip of the iceberg, or rather, the tip of the dune. Archaeologists still have a lot to learn about Iraq's role in human evolution. It's clear there were ancient hominins carving tools, but what were they doing here? Keep in mind, this was more than 1 million years before Homo sapiens even evolved.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The fearsome marine predator. Scientists in Chile recently discovered the remains of one of the largest marine predators this world has ever seen. Bones of the prehistoric monster were found in the middle of one of the driest places on Earth. The fossilized creature was dug out of the sand of the Atacama Desert, a barren wasteland of dirt and stone. Even though the desert is currently an inhospitable nightmare, it was once at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And for that reason, scientists have been able to discover the remains of lots of ancient ocean reptiles. This specific extinct reptile was a pliosaur, something with an even more powerful bite than the famous T-Rex. The pliosaur inhabited this part of the ocean 160 million years ago. Archaeologists found the remains of its jaw, a piece of tooth, and several limb fragments. Rodrigo Otero with the University of Chile says the pliosaur was very similar to modern killer whales. They had large skulls, huge teeth for ripping apart victims, and limbs that acted like fins. He also added that the desert is a hotbed of fossils, with thousands, maybe even millions of animal remains hidden deep under the surface. Merid Castle. Merid Castle can be found in a dusty desert about 1,800 feet above sea level. It stands in northwestern Saudi Arabia, in the old and forgotten town of Dumat al-Jandal. It's one of the most important historical sites in the area, looking like a giant sand castle the tide forgot to wash away. It really does look like it was sculpted by a child with a bucket and a whole lot of beach sand. But of course, Merid Castle wasn't built by a kid at the beach. It was likely constructed around the 3rd century AD, right before the invasion of Zenobia, queen of Palmyra. Historical records show that Dumat al-Jandal rebelled about 1,700 years ago, and Zenobia came to squash the rebellion, only to find herself stuck outside the walls of the massive castle and its fortifications. This was not great news for the queen, who had already brought a huge amount of the Roman East under her control. She even annexed Egypt in 270 and had taken control of Anatolia in 271. The issue was that taking control of so many areas typically resulted in pockets of rebellion. And here at the Merid Castle, the rebels had a fortification the queen just couldn't seem to break. In the end, the queen had bigger fish to fry. She declared her son the emperor in 272, only to be swiftly defeated by the Romans. She was captured, sent to Rome as a prisoner, and stayed there the rest of her life. The Merid Castle remained an important desert outpost during the emergence of Islam in the 7th century, but was gradually abandoned until it became a ruin. Would you travel through the desert to see the castle? Let me know in the comments. And now for number 8. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to give a huge thank you to David Bratcher for supporting this channel. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe for more videos like these. Somalian meteorite crash. Scientists recently discovered a pair of minerals completely new to our planet. These two minerals were never found on Earth before, and came from a meteorite that crash-landed in the desert of Somalia. The meteorite was found near the town of El Ali, and it's positively massive. This thing is almost 7 feet long, just shy of 4.5 feet tall, and 3.3 feet wide. It also weighs an astounding 16.8 tons. or about 33,000 pounds. This puts it in the top 10 for largest fallen things ever found on the planet. It's believed the meteorite is very old, seeing as such a thing bursting through the atmosphere would have undoubtedly caught someone's attention. It would have hit the ground with the force of a bomb, so scientists think it must be extremely old. It was only dug out of the ground because a mining company had prospectors digging for rare minerals. A small chunk of the meteorite was recently sent to the University of Alberta. There, researchers began looking at the composition of the rock. That was when they uncovered unknown minerals. Scientists with the University of Alberta's Electron Microbe Laboratory identified two minerals that had never been seen in nature before. Chris Hurd, one of the scientists involved in the study, said he was floored by what they found. There are only about 4,000 minerals that researchers know about, and so even two new additions is a huge deal. We don't really know what the minerals are going to be good for yet. We only have 2 small samples of them, which isn't a lot to go on. We don't know if they could help in future technology or how prevalent they are in the universe. Scientists even believe they may have a third mineral identified, but they are still studying to confirm. Treasures in Chihuahua. In the Mexican state of Chihuahua, scientists spent the last year, give or take a few months, digging holes in the desert. The holes and trenches dug by researchers were part of an effort to uncover lost ancient artifacts. Amazingly, their efforts paid off. Scientists have discovered pottery shards, pieces of stone, kernels from maize, and even shell beads from the Pacific Ocean over 250 miles away. Most of the excavations occurred south of Casas Grandes, an ancient city that thrived here 800 years ago. Casas Grandes has always been intriguing because the city was built in a desert valley. This was a place with almost no water, and yet people found a way to thrive. There was a population of at least 4,000 people in the city itself, with thousands more in long-lost settlements that have been erased by the desert over the centuries. Researchers wanted to find traces of the lost settlements. That was why they were digging holes all throughout the desert here, trying to find vestiges of the desert people who manipulated the landscape almost 1,000 years ago. The bottom line is that archaeologists now know there was a huge population here. They have found evidence of multiple occupied sites in the desert valley stretching away from Casas Grandes. What they can't understand is why so many people lived here. There appears to have been multiple periods of urbanization. In other words, people kept coming back to the desert ecosystem and rebuilding cities. They clearly had some knowledge that allowed them to live in such brutal conditions. Either that, or they were gluttons for punishment. Why do you think people kept building in this particular spot in the desert for so long? Shipwreck in the desert. In the Namibian desert, diamond miners found a ship that crashed 500 years ago on the coastline. And while the skeleton coast of Africa may be famous for its broken shipwrecks, this one was truly shocking. It contained an estimated $13 million worth of gold coins. The discovery was made on the coast in April of 2008 by the mining company De Beers. It was lost for 5 centuries because it was beneath the floor of the ocean itself. The mining site was in the surf zone, a place where the desert meets the ocean waves. It's an extremely volatile area that would be impossible to mine without modern technology. The miners built a massive seawall parallel to the beach, which formed a lagoon. They then pumped the seawater from the lagoon to make a dry space where they could mine. But when they drained the lagoon, they found the shipwreck and its amazing fortune. They didn't even need to do any mining, and they'd already found $13 million. Dr. Dieter Nolli from the Southern Africa Institute of Marine Archaeological Research said he wasn't really surprised. Portuguese sailors used to call this stretch of coastline the Gates of Hell because of how dangerous it was. This particular ship likely sank around 1535. Researchers think it was the Bom Jesus, on its way to India with 44,000 pounds of copper and a huge load of gold and ivory tusks. Lost history in Syria. There is a very strange mystery in the Syrian desert. In 2009, Robert Mason from the Royal Ontario Museum was investigating an ancient monastery when he came across some rock formations. These rock formations were obviously much older than the monastery itself, dating back an estimated 10,000 years. Mason, a seasoned archaeologist, was shocked by this revelation. He did some more digging and found even more stone formations in the nearby desert that may have been used as Neolithic animal traps. Although the region is dry today, it was much greener thousands of years ago. It was green enough that early humans would have come here to hunt animals. The monastery where Mason made these discoveries is called Deir Mar Musa, and it too is full of mystery. The monastery was built around the 4th century AD, occupied until the 1800s, and then utterly decimated by earthquakes. It wasn't until the 1990s that the monastery was repaired and became active again. But Mason believes the monastery is even older and was used as a Roman watchtower to survey the desert near Damascus. Strange new species. Scientists recently discovered a new species of animal thriving in one of the hottest places on the planet. A new kind of arthropod was found living in the blistering heat of Iran's Lut Desert. It's a kind of crustacean, like a shrimp, something you would typically expect to find living in the ocean. Dr. Hossein Rajeh said finding such a creature in a hot and dry environment is sensational. The discovery was made during an ecological mission to understand the diversity of the Lut Desert. Researchers couldn't believe their eyes when they found a tiny crustacean living in the suffocating heat. It was found in a seasonal lake, a kind of oasis within the desert. But it's still extremely bizarre because the lake isn't always there. It dries up and only comes back during the wet season. And during times of drought, the lake vanishes for years at a time. And yet these crustaceans, these little itty-bitty shrimps, have managed to adapt. They can survive up to several decades in the dried sediment as they wait for rain to fill the lake basin with water. The Lost Lords of the Sahara. The Sahara Desert is the biggest hot desert on the planet. The deserts of Antarctica and the Arctic are technically bigger, but those are classified as cold. The Sahara is a brutal nightmare, not a place most people want to live. And yet, there has been a population here for as long as civilization has been around. One of the oldest groups who call the Sahara Desert their home are the Tuaregs. They live in the desert now and have been there for thousands of years. The Tuareg get their name from the city of Targa, found in the sweltering desert of South Libya. It's not exactly clear when they started living in the desert, as our historical records really only go back so far. In the 5th century BC, Greek historian Herodotus wrote of a Libyan tribe called the Garamantes. These may have been the ancestors of the modern Tuaregs, nomads who wandered across the desert on camels. According to the Tuareg legends, their origin can be traced back to the 3rd century AD with Queen Tin Hinan. As you can see, there are a lot of discrepancies over when these people conquered the desert. Some even say they founded the city of Timbuktu in Niger in the 11th century. Old Dongola. The desert capital of Old Dongola can be found in northern Sudan. It's located on the eastern banks of the Nile River and was once home to the mighty rulers of the Kingdom of Makuria. This great kingdom rose to power in the 5th century after the Kushite Empire of Nubia collapsed. The Kushites were the ones who made some of the most breathtaking pyramids in Nubia, many of which still survive today in the ancient city of Meroe. Old Dongola reached its peak in the 10th or 11th century, around 500 years after it was founded. What began as a humble city built on the walls of a crumbling fortress soon became a major urbanized town. All around the fortress walls were small communities of desert dwellers. There were also palaces, huge churches, and a whole industry dedicated to serving the caravans that brought trading goods in and out of the region. Today, very little remains of what was a mighty kingdom that lasted longer than the original Roman Empire. Although they reached their peak by the 11th century, they continued to function as a society until the 14th century. It was only when the Arabs attacked that Old Dongola found itself in trouble. The desert city may even have survived if they hadn't been ravaged by the plague and everybody died. The Silk Road. Archaeologists in the desert wasteland between Israel and Jordan recently made an amazing discovery. A team of researchers from the Israel Antiquities Authority found traces of cotton and silk fabrics from 1,300 years ago. They believe these fabrics were imported from India and China along the Silk Road. The Silk Road was one of the greatest trading networks that ever existed. It was a road that went all the way from the farthest reaches of China to the gates of Rome. Huge parts of it stretched across deadly deserts. Merchants traveled along the network with exotic goods, dropping them off at various cities and making a huge profit. Silk textiles were particularly lucrative and made merchants wealthy during the Silk Road's 1,500 years of existence. The Silk Road even continued to function during the death of the Roman Empire, the Black Death that ravaged Europe, and the rampaging Mongol hordes. Researchers found traces of fabrics from the 7th century AD in the Arava Desert. We know many of the fabrics came from India because of the way they were designed. The designs on the fabrics look similar to wall paintings from the 6th century found in India's Ajanta caves. The fabrics were probably on their way from India to ancient Nubia, south of Egypt, when for some unknown reason they got lost in the desert. Thanks for watching! If you had to be stuck in any desert on Earth for a whole week, which one do you think you could survive in? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!